Hey guys, good afternoon. This is Carlos with Das Audio, one of the sales managers here at Das Audio of America in my beautiful Miami, Florida. Thanks for joining us for our second installment of the heart and soul of the show. And basically, this is an ongoing series that looks at different aspects of the industry, the production and entertainment industry. Of course, with a skew towards audio. Of course, that's what we're about here at Das Audio. But although there's a lot of facets to the production business, of course, there's plenty to talk about in the audio realm. And so our first, if you were on board for our first chat about production and show advanced workflow, that went over well. We got a lot of good compliments on that. Today is episode 2, system optimization workflow. And back today with us is Burton Ishmael.
Hi, Carlos.
Hey, Burton, what's going on?
All is well.
So Burton's a great buddy, but also a great friend to Das Audio. He's been around the world literally multiple times in the production business, and been in the production business for quite a while himself as myself. And so we're lucky to have Burton help us out with this and really be the driving force behind the information that you're going to be hearing today and checking out today. We'll post some handouts, or excuse me, a link to checking out some of the handouts that or the slides themselves in the chat. If you have any questions, please do that through Facebook Live. Just post any questions, and we will be answering them live if we can. And most likely at the end of the session, we'll spend a few minutes on that as well. All right, Burton, take it away.
Hey, thanks, Carlos. So thankful for this opportunity to be able to share with our folks and to be a part of the DAS family and be able to do this with them. And I appreciate, again, you guys having me on board. And I count it a privilege, and I'm very thankful. So thank you. Great. As Carlos said, last time we spoke about the show advance, and I gave you 3 major parts to consider as we do show advance, and it was the information stage, it was the preparation stage, and it was the execution stage, right? And if we, like I said, if we master those areas, we would really do well in the industry as far as keeping consistency, as far as getting the results we desire, and obviously saving and making some money there. And I know we all have big investments here, so go ahead. If you missed that one, jump back in. I know it's part of the Facebook page, and you can always review it. But today, continuing on, I would like to share with you guys a few more nuggets in dealing with system optimization. And yes, it's a huge topic, right? And it's a huge facet of the audio world. But I being on tour and so forth, you don't always have all the time in the world and so forth. And after a while, sometimes you just have to, trim away the fat. You know what I'm saying, Carlos? Sometimes you just have to get down to exactly what you need to get done, what works. Hey man, I've had trucks, stuck at borders for long hours, and you're running out of time, and there's just certain things you need to get done, and be able to do it fast. So you kind of like narrow down in your toolbox your most important, tools that you're going to go to first. But I want to share with you guys today and talk a little more about system optimization, right? So the question is, what is optimization, and how do you accomplish this when it comes to audio? So if I can put it in the most simplest terms, right, or the most simplest definition, is to be able to get the best out of the proposed system, right? To have it perform exactly to the criteria that that needs to be, dealt with, everything that's laid out, all the issues that you may have to overcome, dealing with whatever angles that you got to deal with, but optimizing the system so that it works to its best, and it also answers and delivers, what we all hope for and expect. And I believe that, doing certain things can bring consistency, and give us that result, right? So where does it start? Where does it end?
So, Burton,
Yeah.
just plain devil's advocate here. Obviously, what you're going to present today is your workflow, the way that you, after years of being in the production business and in the touring business, what you have determined to be obviously the best route, the best manner in order to optimize the system. This is not to say that this is the only way to do it, but it's one way, and the way that you feel has been the most time efficient for you. Am I
Absolutely.
correct?
Absolutely. So, yes, I'm definitely not the Bible on anything here, right? But I do know I have done certain things in my career that has proven to be very successful time and time again. And those are the nuggets that I'd like to share with the rest of our audio, society, right? Definitely, you can go into huge details on the studies of all of these, topics that we're talking about. You can definitely, head straight in there and really, continue to study. So, for sure, I do believe that what I'm going to leave with you guys here today, hopefully will clear up a few things, and also give you some good clear direction, right, when it comes to optimization. So the slide says there, if you're following along, what's involved in system optimization. And lots of times when we think about system optimization, we just think, okay, it's the use of an analyzer. And although it does include that, it's not limited to that. So when we think of this entire concept, right, there's like I said, many things are involved, but I've got 4 specific things that we want to pay attention to. Okay. So we're thinking about a sound system. We've got the information on the gig, and we've prepped it and so forth and all of that. But we have to give thought when we're going to optimize the system, right, to first the environment that it's going to be used in. Okay. That is part of optimizing a sound system, right? Now, I can give you an example. If you take a certain car engine and put it in a body that it doesn't belong, then you have to now optimize the body for the engine, right? You may have to reinforce the chassis and so forth. So you've got those things to deal with. Also, when it comes to the environment, you have to know: am I going into a room that's got all hard surfaces? Do we have is there ceiling tiles involved? Is there any acoustic treatment? Anything like that involved? And if we're going into just a raw building, or a building that doesn't have anything of that sort, then we have to also think of that as part of the optimization process, because those two things are that with the sound system, those two things are going to work hand in hand. I do encourage you guys to, at least, if you don't want to embark in a career of acoustics, at least learn or understand the concept of what a standing wave is when you go into a venue, right? And I'll drop you a formula in 1 second on how you can just maybe write it down in your little notes on your cell phone or whatever, but you can always quickly find out what what standing waves might be, or what it might be in the room that you're going in. So you have an idea that, if you have a buildup there, or you have a, whatever the case is, you know what to expect. So if you look on the first line, I have there also the letters SBI, speaker boundary interference. Now, we may not see that a whole lot in our industry because we don't always have, speakers against a wall. And if we do, it's closer. Right now, I remember back in the days when we brought monitors into a studio, we would have to play with the position of the monitors for some time just to get the right spot. We would move it closer to one wall, we would move it off the wall, we would move ourselves around, just until we found the right spot for it to work. And it had nothing to do with frequency response or tuning the monitors at that point. It just had to do with how those things interacted with the environment that it was placed in at that time. So, at that time we knew how to look at room modes and speaker boundary interference, and we kind of knew what frequencies to look at. So we would actually get a monitor that would roll off, at around there, and then the subwoofer will pick up from there, if we had that at a different location. So those things, putting them together like that, made the system work together and gave us the response we was looking for, the target response we were looking for. So having that information, right, really does help, knowing what environment you're going to head into. All right. So first one in optimizing is to pay attention to the environment, learn a little about the environment, at least learn what standing waves are and what speaker boundary interference is. Now, I'm going to drop this formula here, Carlos. For example, what this says here is sound moves at 1,130 feet per second, right? So if you've got a wall or two parallel walls, and say the two parallel walls are 10 feet apart, right? The formula is you multiply that by 2, and you divide it by 1,130, and that'll give you the room mode, the standing wave. So that's 57 hertz, right? So if you're going to go into a building, say your walls are maybe 60 feet apart, 60 feet apart, you multiply that by 2, that's 120 divided by 1130. And I don't know, Carlos, I don't know if my math is right or wrong, but you're probably going to be around 9 to 11, somewhere in there, right? So
I'll take your word for it.
Right. So around there. So we'll see that 9 hertz may not be an issue in any one of our lives when it comes to audio, right? Because I think we're still trying to get subwoofers to play nice down there. If we can even,
achieve those.
Right. Another topic for another time.
Yeah.
Right. But at least having this information, and being able to manipulate this formula, it can get you at least some basic information on the environment. Good. So moving along, we also talked about the use of a prediction software, right? And we mentioned last week in our previous webinar, we talked about the use of Ease Focus, right? And from the use of the software, we're able to get information such as speaker splay angles, coverage information. We're also able to see SPL information, and also a representation of what the magnitude or the frequency response will be, right? And that's part of the optimization process. That's where you sit, before you even do an install. You're playing with the way you might, put it in there, and the way how high you might hang, and or all of this stuff you're playing with, and what you're doing is optimizing for the most perfect position in the venue, right? This is why it's so important that part of your optimization process also includes the use of a prediction software. Okay, it's not just limited, like I said, to an analyzer. Whatever you go, you throw up it, and you're gonna come in there and you're gonna master tune and you're gonna overcome all the obstacles. That's not how it works. You're gonna find yourself in a lot of trouble that way, right? But you definitely want to involve the use of a prediction software, and we know we have East Focus at hand, right? Also, the
Now,
parameters. Go ahead.
how often should you be using prediction software, Burton? And in any, well, you mentioned installation, but I think you were talking about the installation of a sound system for a performance, a temporary installation.
Well, that's a great question. How often? Well, I would be contradicting myself if I didn't say every time.
Every time.
So every time is the answer to that question. How often? So if you want a full optimization process, right, Carlos, you have to be using prediction software, right? It definitely part of the optimization process.
So it behooves you to do some homework about the particular venue that you're going to be working in. Obviously, you need to, in order to do that model in any prediction software, you've got to know something about the room, whether it be dimensions, trim height, surfaces. Some software will allow you to put in surfaces or not. You'll be getting more into that later, but you do need to know as much as possible about the room that you're going to be in.
Yes, and this is a great opportunity, right, to investigate and to see what you're up against and start to come up with solutions way before you even enter the environment. So absolutely, this is a must part of the optimization process. It begins here also, right? And then the prediction software, uh, I know that there's a lot of choices out there, but you're able to actually build the environment with the materials that it's actually built with, so you can actually do some room investigations also. So it goes on and on and on, right? But definitely involve software into this. And yes, Carlos, I use it all the time, right? This is my compass, basically, to steer me into the direction. And then in my philosophy, my workflow is prediction tells me where to go, and the analyzer just confirms, right? Or reveals something that I might have overlooked. That's what happens in there. So parameters that you're going to deal with, and we talked about DOS-AIM and DOS-NET. We have our H.E.R filters and so forth. Those things have to be calculated precisely so that we get the best results. So we know exactly what filters we're putting in. We know how we're aiming the array. We know crossover points. We know what might be suggested delay times. Those parameters have to be inputted into these processors and into the electronics, right? Exactly the way we want the system to operate, right? So that's also part of the optimization process. The actual information needed to be input into the electronics, right? So that's a big part of it also. And finally, right, we get down to this. This is where we talk about the use of the analyzer, right? And I want to say, and I'm certainly guilty of this, it's probably one of the most abused piece of test equipment that we have in the audio industry. And there's we try to do a whole lot with it, and sometimes it's like, we say mixing, you try to fix something with an EQ or a compressor or multiple plug in chains or chains of processing, and sometimes all that is needed is just a level change in one fader, and that might do the whole thing. Start with the level, start with the basics. But somehow I feel like, lots of us feel that, once we use an analyzer, once we go ahead in that process, then we can get it all right, and it'll automatically give us the results we're looking for. And I seriously beg to differ. This is why I say, considering all the two other aspects that I've mentioned, three other aspects that I've mentioned has to play in the whole optimizing process, right? But the use of an analyzer. So let's dig into that. Let's look at that for a little bit, right? So in using an analyzer, I'll leave with you a couple of practical things that I believe that you can find useful when we're doing this, because this is a very critical part of it also, that if we get this, it's our last, well, it's almost the second to last phase or step before we sign off on things being the way it should be, right? And a lot of mistakes can be made here also, right? But I want to share with you a couple of things that are important when you use the analyzer. All right, so we've got a list here, and we're going to discuss mic positions, right? The noise floor, the capturing process, the alignment process, and final tuning, right? So let's jump into it. Let's first talk about one of the most critical parts of using an analyzer, and that is, guess what? The mic positions. Super, super important. This is the eye to the analyzer, right? Wherever what this is going to see is going to, give you the information that you're going to make your judgments and your decisions on. And it's going to see exactly what it's going to see. Whether that information is trustworthy or not, it's going to see that, right? But we want to be able to pick and choose the best mic positions for gathering of this information. So unfortunately, one mic position doesn't fit all. It really does depend on what you're trying to do at the moment. That really will determine the mic position you choose. So super, super important. One mic position is not recommended, right? For specific, it might work for one, but it may not work for the other. And down in the discussion, I'll be able to show you a little more so that you can understand what I'm saying. So for example, if you're going to do equalization, I do recommend a specific position of that microphone as in relation to the microphone and the loudspeaker. When it comes to level balancing also, when it comes to finding out speaker splay or speaker positioning, if you want to know how to point or aim a speaker and you're going to use the help of an analyzer, those mic positions are very specific, or they're better choices that you can make instead of just sticking it one place and just leaving it there and think that's going to work for this. Setting delays, very specific mic position or recommended mic positions, right? That now obviously we know that real life we may have to try a few things and compare and then eventually choose the best route to go. But in the perfect world, there are some perfect mic positions that we can choose, ones that are more practical and ones that we can definitely hope for the better results, right? So let's talk about it. We've got here an on-axis mic position point, right? And that's somewhere between the midpoint of the speaker or the array, right? And the coverage edge of the array. So that could be considered vertical top and bottom, and also horizontal left and right. Okay, that midpoint somewhere there would be the on axis position, and that's a great position if you're going to do equalization, right? It's a great position if you're going to try to balance out the frequency response or tune something to a target curve. That's a great position for that. Off axis, left and right, the lateral, and then we have the vertical, top and bottom of the array. So I'll share with you here a slide that kind of shows if there was one loudspeaker in there, right, you would have off axis to the left, off axis to the right, and then right down the center of that speaker, we're talking that's the on axis position. When we look at it from the top down or a horizontal view, the lateral view. Okay, so if you're going to put an on axis microphone, we know it's dead center of that walkway there in this picture. Moving along, if I can get my mouse here. Here is a concept of the vertical mic positions. We see the on axis kind of being somewhere between, the center, a little higher than the center maybe, or in the center. Play around that region right there. You could do. I've done something called a star pattern before. In positions, just to see what a microphone might do. It all depends if you have the time. But there you see where the vertical top is, right? And that is, within the highest seating area of your audience. That's considered the vertical top of the loudspeaker system, right? And then the vertical bottom is coming closer to the lowest seating area. So you've seen the left and right, and you've seen the midpoint, and then now you've seen the vertical top and the vertical bottom. Now, that sounds like a lot of microphones. Well, if you want to make your life simpler and easier, obviously having an arsenal of more than one microphone is definitely recommended, right? And it'll guarantee you that you'll definitely work faster. Obviously, the bigger the venues, the more you have to walk around. Cables might be behind you. If you have the wireless system, then that's great. But if you don't, then that's a ton of work, right? But at least judging from this, you would have to probably have about, I would say, at least 4 microphones. So it's good to have one on the vertical top, one on the vertical bottom, obviously one on axis, and maybe either to the left or the right on the horizontal, right? On the lateral plane. How we doing there, Carlos? Oh, I lost him.
Sorry. Hello, 1, 2. Okay. Sorry. Had my mic muted. You got me?
Yeah. We
Okay.
got you.
So I know you're not going to get into what microphones are best or types of microphones or whatever, but in general, you want to try to have 4 microphones of the same brand and type. If possible, many microphone manufacturers, measurement microphone, we're talking about, of course, here, will sell match pairs or match sets. So that's important. The equipment, or depending on the software you're using, yes, there's software out there that's going to allow you to work on these 4 mic positions or work with these 4 mic positions at the same time, while others may require that you take a snapshot and then average those together, which I know you're going to get into, Burton. My point is that it's at the very least you need to have at least one good microphone and a interface that allows you for 2 inputs. So don't get scared about Burton suggesting that you have the 4 microphones up front. If you're going to spend some money on the microphones and you're going to have 4 eventually, you don't need to get them all at once. Start with 1, start with a pair, maybe a pair, and then work your way up to the 4 units.
Absolutely. And you know what? If you're just working with 1 right now, the exercise is not a bad option, right? moving it around. I know that moving around a microphone is kind of it's got its plus and its minuses. You know, it's like having chlorine in water. You know, it swims all around, right? So again, you know, just having that ease of work and consistency. But obviously, you know, if you have to move around one microphone, at least mark out your positions and so forth, right? But it's always good to be able to see them all at the, you know what I'm saying, Carlos? When you can see them all at the same time, then you can say, okay, this is consistent here, this is consistent there, but this in this position, something is happening here. Maybe there's a dip in the frequency or a boost in the frequency response. Then you can say, you know what, that might be a localized issue right there, you know, in the venue. You might be closer to a wall or something like that. But it's good to see it all at the same time, right? That's obviously the best way if you can. But like Carlos says, you know, you have to start where you start, right? Good.
Yeah.
So
really quick, let me just say that we got a question from Terrence Friday on Facebook on the subject that you're talking about right now. I'm going to put it on the screen.
Burton, you got that?
yes, I just saw it. What do you do if you don't have that many microphones to still achieve a good system tuning? Right. Well, that's a good question. Thank you, Terrence. Definitely, like Carlos says, if you have one or two, what you're gonna have to do is, I would suggest that you go and you mark out your positions, and then you're gonna have to move the microphones around. Right now, the reason why you mark out your positions is that you can go back and put the microphone in the same position.
When you need to bring it back, if you need to do the trace again, or measurement again, you need to know exactly where you had that microphone. So you're going to lay out four positions. If you don't have four microphones, lay them out, mark them as he suggested, and then you'll move the microphones one at a time until you get the four traces. Burton will get a little bit more into this, but yes, you can start with one microphone, Terrence.
Yeah, you just have to move them around. That's all. Yeah, it's not the amount of microphones that give you the success, right? It's more of where you place the microphones. But the benefit of having multiple microphones is that you're able to see what's going on a broader area of your audience than just one position at a time, right? Where you have to really pay attention to the trace, might have to evaluate it right then and there, you know.
And if I can interject something else here, all right.
You can, sir. Hey, he's the brains there, you know. This guy.
Many times you go to a show or you're part of a crew and you're there assisting the sound guy a lot. And sometimes you'll notice that the guy might have one microphone set up at the front of house position. Well, if that was the only microphone he had, and the only position that he ever did, to be quite frank with you, many of us sound guys are selfish, but it's selfish to use just one mic position in order to tune a sound system, because what does that mean? That system is perfectly, or maybe not perfectly, but maybe in tune or in time or equalized at that one position where you're standing at. Sure, that's great for you, but what about the people the 2,000 people or the 12,000 people that came in and they're paying to be there, and they're the reason why you're there and your artist is there? So the four mic position thing, for lack of a better word, is strictly so that you can get an idea of what's happening in the whole venue, and whether you average those readings together, or you just contemplate what's happening up front versus the middle versus the lower, the back versus upstairs in the balcony. It gives you more references. So Terrence, again, one microphone is sufficient to get started, but you definitely want to be always thinking about multiple mic positions so that everybody is taken and the whole venue is taken into into place. Sorry, we probably beleaguered the point a little bit.
Which I was just gonna ask for a little leeway just to spin off of something you just said with that one microphone down the center. Now, if you've had any kind of studio experience, the term phantom center should ring a bell, right? And what's happening in the phantom center is a summation of the left and right reference monitor, right? And it's very important because stereo imaging is something that's very crucial in building a mix. Building a mix is not just all about frequency response, right? And going down the road on our other classes to come or other webinars to come, we'll talk a little more about this. But building a mix, the concept is you've got different elements and you've got to place them on this canvas, or the technical term is the sound field. And the sound field deals with width and height and depth, right? And when you're building a mix, before you're starting to do certain things, you're trying to place these puzzle pieces in its rightful position, based upon just being able to level balance or using the fader. When audio engineering first started out, guys only had a level fader and they were called balance engineers, right? And what they were paid to do was to sit there and try to come up with the best balance that they could have on a monophonic setup, right? So now what happens is if we talk about a microphone being down the center between the left and right position, right? In the studio, you may have heard about the concept of the perfect triangle. Being in that perfect triangle area where you get a good representation of the left and right, a good representation of the sound field, and your ears are in that zone. Unfortunately, in the live world, you may not be in that zone at all, right? Now, here's what's happening. We talked about the left and right horizontal, and that's an off-axis position of anything, right? Or it's going towards the off-axis. And what happens off-axis, you're definitely not going to get the best response out of any box, when the further you go to the extremes of it. Obviously high frequencies are narrower, right, in its nature. Lower frequencies widen out, so you may see a dip in the high frequency energy as you go off axis. So tuning at that position will come with its pros and cons, right? But keep in mind, if you want to find out the delay between the two, if there's a delay offset between the two, and that the measurement from that microphone to the right side is the same as the measurement from the microphone to the left side, then that's a great position to do an alignment, right? But when or a level balancing, right? So you can look at what's coming out the left side and the right side of the PA at that mic position and see the SPL and do a level balancing. You could do a delay setup, but an equalization might not be the best spot to choose, because like we said, equalization, we want to kind of bear towards more of the on axis of the array or the speaker that's in question, right? Good. Moving along in the mic positions, we also have the concept of the ground plane. Okay, knowing that if you're in an arena floor or it's just a floor alone, we're gonna have a floor bounce up to the microphone, and sometimes you might just have to live with that, or you go on the ground plane. Now, in my experience, what I've noticed on the ground plane is that I have an increase in high frequency energy, and that's just because on the ground plane, I believe that there is a less interference with the reflections, right? There's not that is more of a summing area, but you see it more on the high frequencies than you see it anywhere else. So keep that in mind, that, if you can, you might be more coherent on the ground plane because you won't have the floor bounce to deal with, right? But you may have an increase in high frequencies, right? Also, you may be in a situation where it's, an auditorium with seats that are sloped. You've got that issue with it. You can put a piece of wood there to create like a floor bounce, right? And that kind of, offsets the seats. Now, if you're in an environment where it's hard seats, right, and you put the microphone right against the hard seat, what's going to happen is when someone sits there, then that area becomes more absorptive, right? So it's going to reflect less. And again, if there's any summation or destruction there when the microphone is just at the hard seat, that's not going to be true information when someone sits there. So you have to be careful with that. Now, what I like to do in this situation is I like to keep my microphone, when it comes to seats like this, just above like ear height, kind of. And I wish I had a diagram to show, but just above ear height, wherein the microphone is not directly in front of a surface that's going to reflect to it. So if this is the back of the seat, I'll probably go higher where it's farther from the seat behind the microphone, kind of like, to lessen that that reflection that the microphone can see. And it's very important when you're doing like front fills and stuff, that you really put that microphone in the right zone. And remember also, in front fills, there is a vertical limit of the speaker when you start to go off axis of the speaker. So you kind of want to also keep that in mind, that you're going off axis as you go up the height plane, as you go up vertically. So you don't want to go too far off that you're now within, the off axis of the speaker itself. So you want to get down closer to the box, but be mindful of what's around the microphone, right, to create that reflections. Mic positions, if like I said, if we're doing like a delay or balancing between two cabinets, balancing could be done directly once the delay is right. I mean, if you know that your measurements are exactly what it needs to be, then you can level balance between a right and left, right? You can also move the mics out from that position, or get two microphones, and from that go to an equalizing position where you're on axis. But this is really showing an off axis, equidistant area between the two, right? This also is very crucial in subwoofer and full range alignment. I know lots of times we can't get right beneath or right in the middle of both of them, but this is a great spot in between the two to get the alignment done, right? Sometimes you have to just, if you're staying on the floor, and you're aligning at ear height, then you're aligning at ear height, right? But the theory of the concept is, if you are equidistant again between both sources, right, that alignment is perfect for that position. And that's kind of like the dilemma in delaying or alignment, is that that's the perfect position. And as long as you stay on that plane, right, you're in the perfect position. But the moment you go off, you're not in the perfect position anymore. There is a off shift, but that's something that you have to deal with. The issue is that you want to be correct at an equidistant point, right? And then obviously, if you move farther away from one driver and closer to the other, that's going to be a difference there, right? However, you want to know that the system is working as one at the point it should be working as one, right? So that's where it's at. Here's another example, right? If you have flown subs to be on axis, right? If you're going to align on axis between the two on the flown subs, if it's subs that are ground stacked with the array that's above, again, the midpoint, right? Good. Now, moving along in the analyzer, we talked about mic position there. Going back to our list of things to cover with the analyzer, let's talk also about the noise floor. Now, noise floor is very important, right? I'm going to jump to a slide here on smart. If you look at the noise floor, let's say, for example, this color, the brown is where we're going to tune at. But the other color, I don't know what color is that, Carlos? Is that like a blue-gray? I guess I could change it, right, to a different color. Well, anyways, if the concept of the noise floor, it's good to be able to set up your microphones and just look at your analyzer and see what's happening. You know, if it's a crew setting up, or if it's you alone in the building, you're just seeing what is happening. You're seeing the noise floor. And this is important because sometimes you wonder, how loud should I run my pink noise, right? To be able to tune the system. How loud should I run it? And this really helps and gives you direction when you're doing that. So go ahead.
Oh no, well, you're probably going to get into it, but
Yeah.
but
So should I go?
Noise floor includes all the ambient noise, including the carpenters working in the background, the guys moving around the stuff on stage, the lighting truss going up and down, and the riggers still, because you may be tuning while all this is going on. Correct?
Yeah. Well, before the tuning starts, you want to investigate the room. And like you're saying, if all of that stuff is happening, right, that can give you an indication of, you know, how the energy is dissipating in the room. So say, for example, well, is this green now? Sort of green, right? You get it, right, Carlos?
Yeah, it is green. Yeah.
Right. So if that's what I'm seeing for most of the day, right, I know that that's coming in at, you know, at this highest point here, we've got about 65 dBs at, you know, 680 hertz, right? And that's the level that's at in the noise floor. So whether it's, you know, the setup crew or noise around or whatever, you want to kind of take this information and make it useful, right? Now, obviously, if you've been in the arena, as soon as the doors are open and the crowd rushes in, it's a bunch of noise that comes with those, you know, with the patrons that come in, right? You hear it, the foot stomping, the yelling, the running. Everybody is excited for the show they're running in. So you get that noise floor. And this noise floor now may be up here, right? When that happens. Also in the show, right? The noise floor can be, you know, louder than what it was during the day, right? So, but having an idea of where the noise floor is very important. So here's what I like to do. I like to look at the noise floor. I take a capture of that, and then I make a decision. Am I going to be running my show tonight at 100 dB SPL, at 103 dB SPL, whatever? So what I do is, whatever this difference is, I will actually generate my pink noise to that level. So maybe this could be 20 dBs above the noise floor. Now, if I say I'm going to give this noise floor 10 more dBs, and then I'm going to tune the system at 20 dBs above, right? Then I know how much to run my pink noise or whatever my program material is. Now, this is very important, right? Because and not to get too deep into things here, but Fletcher Munson, right? When we think about, you know, the equal loudness contour and how your hearing works, right? Depending on how loud you're playing music, it's gonna give you the information on how you're balanced between your lows and your highs need to be in your mid-range, right? So establishing how loud you're going to run your show should already be telling your mind what your target curve is going to be, or around there, right? So if you see your noise floor is about here, then figure, right, you're going to actually run your pink noise, you know, maybe 20, 30 dBs above the noise floor, right? Just so that you know that no matter what happens in this room, your system has the gain to overcome the noise floor, right? But even more importantly, when you're going to do your testing and you're going to gather in, as we see in the next phase, in the capture phase, you don't want the noise floor to influence your traces. You don't want the noise floor to influence your, you know, the information that you're gathering, because that's going to smear what we're trying to capture, right? So let's talk about the capturing phase of things, right? Obviously, we know that, you know, the coherence of the information of the trace is really important at this point. So getting that information, making sure it's coherent, making sure that whatever you're sending out into the system is true coming back into the system. And obviously reflections play a part of that, mic positions play a part of that, the noise floor plays a part of that, right? So keep that in mind. Good. Let's talk about alignment, a little bit more about alignment, right? Now, just to clear up some other myths here, and I'm trying to keep it very basic, but here we have two traces, right? One being the sub, which is the blue, and the full range being the brown, right? Now, we have to understand in alignment that there is something called the acoustic crossover point, which is different from the electronic crossover point, okay? And understanding the difference between the two. Now, right here, if I put my cursor, my pointer right between where the two frequency traces intersect, I see that intersects at 70 hertz, right? That is my acoustic crossover point. Now, that may be different than my driver crossover point, which the driver may be rated at 50 or 60 or 80, whatever the case is. This is where the two elements or the sources interact with each other. Now, can this acoustic crossover point change? Absolutely. It can change if you change levels. Okay? Now, here's the issue that you must be aware of. If you're going to time a line, right, at a specific crossover point, acoustic crossover point, you have to be very careful that you don't change levels back and forth. But I'll show you, this has happened to me, but I'll show you a little trick. Good. So we talk about the acoustic, we're talking about time alignment. The first thing that one need, somebody doing this need to have is some idea of where you're going to go. Now you see a red trace just popped up there. Now this is what I call my personal target curve. So everybody's got my tricks now, right? This is my target curve. Now this is where I first balance the system, right? Now I'm talking about a system that has a subwoofer system and a system that has a full range system. This is where I balance things. So for example, here's what the sub's going to do, right? I can either turn it down or turn it up, but I will turn this up to where it's actually within that balance there. And here will be my top box, and I can turn that down or up to where most of that is involved. So I see I have it level balance between top and bottom. Here now I can see where my acoustic crossover point is. And that's where I know that my time alignment has to be exact, right? Now, if, for example, I say today I want to run my subs maybe 5 dBs above my target curve. So 1, 2, sorry, that's not the sub, but this is the sub. So I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dBs above my target curve. Now we see that the intersecting point becomes 82 hertz. So now I have a different crossover point or a different alignment point. So that's the acoustic crossover point that we must be aware of. Right now, here's the trick, and this one is really good. I like to do a plus and minus 10 dBs of change. Carlos, that's a good one. All right. I'm really sharing a really good secret here. Well, it's not a secret, but plus or minus 10 dBs, you can take that into consideration, right? So what do I mean by that? So we know that if I level bounce, right, Carlos, with the target curve, I see that my acoustic crossover point here is 75, right? So if I move the subwoofer up, let's say I move the subwoofer down 10 dB. So I click this 10 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And remember that first 75, all right, Carlos?
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I did lower my subwoofer 10 dBs down, now my acoustic crossover point becomes 63 hertz, right? Good. So
Wow.
what I will do.
So yeah, I'm recording. I'm writing this all down. Hopefully, you guys are too. We're learning some interesting tips here.
Right.
For sure.
So what I'll do. So I lowered the subwoofer 10 dBs, right? I will also raise the subwoofer 10 dBs, or I can lower the tops, right? 10 dBs. It'll give me the same information. So now I'll bring that down 10. So our definite value was 75. If we go 10 dB down, right, it's 63. Now if I go, oh, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Is this 75? Oh, went 3 dBs more, and see 3 dBs more, change that cross that. I messed up here, Carlos. Let's get this back to its 75 or whatever it is. All right, let's say 75, 78. The point is, I'm going to bring this down 10 dBs. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I'll leave it at 9 because I think I was 1 below. Now my new acoustic crossover point with the 10 dB of the subwoofer being higher is now 90. Okay, so we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, somewhere around there. We had 75, right? Then we had 63, and then we had 90, right? So we know within the window of 63 to 90, right? Any kind of playing in between there gives us a plus or minus 10 fluctuation or deviation. So we want to now look at almost aligning on the average, right, between that area. Now we can, that's a personal choice. If you want to stick to your 75, by all means, stick to your 75. If you think things are going to always stay there, stick to the 75. I like that play. You know, I do a lot of hip hop acts. I do a lot of R&B stuff. I do a lot of mixture of everything. So I like to be able to sometimes, you know, when my good PMs come next to me and be like, hey, can I get a little more tonight? I got it. You know, I don't really have to go to the mix. I could just go to the output, you know, and just go and do it there, you know.
And Burton, I want to maybe put out a couple of disclaimers here. You mentioned some of the acts that you work with, or the type of acts. So your target curve, if you could leave up just the target curve for a moment, is, I mean, there's a reason for that target curve, and maybe you want to get into it, but
yes,
assuming we have time.
I can quickly. I know we're running out of time, but yes, the target curve is. You know, whenever I'm in the studio, I actually look for a linear balance between the sub and the tops. With the reference monitors, I actually try to go linear flat against it. I don't really have one in here, but it's gonna almost look like that with the lower. It's just that when you go into bigger environments, you need a little more low end, right? Just to fill the room. Also, fans like to feel that energy. You know what I'm saying? They're not really, they want to feel the music.
It's
So
also, in my opinion, or correct me if I'm wrong, but also the nature of some of the acts that you're working with, and or personal preference. Correct?
absolutely. So you can actually tailor your own target curve to whatever criteria you want to meet, right? I've just found this one to be very good to me in just about any genre. Also, the target curve also is related to the level you're running your show at. Okay, because again, Fletcher Munson says for every X amount of dBs here, it'll be sounding equal if it's that amount of dBs on this side also. So keep that in mind, right? But yes, it's taste, it's preference, it's the kind of music you're dealing with. But like I say, have a target curve in mind, right? Knowing
And if you don't mind, the importance of that acoustic crossover point that you were searching for a couple of minutes ago. Could you give us expand just a little bit on that briefly, on the importance of knowing that acoustic crossover point?
Right. So the bottom line is that's where the energy between the radiators are interacting with each other, right? And that's where the time from say a subwoofer and the time from the full range has to be right. Okay, because that's where the two are meeting. That's where the two are shaking hands. There's no other place in the curve that it's happening, and the reason why that's important is if you want the system to work in alignment, right, it has to be right. Now we know that that part of the definition of sound is frequency, amplitude, and time, right? Now if you don't have your time correct, doing your frequencies is not a wise move, right? So time has to be first corrected, right? So that's one of the biggest importance why that amplitude we know comes easy, right? However, if things are not in time, frequency can be off. For example, if I have a microphone that's in front of a loudspeaker and it's seeing this information, but then it receives at the same time a reflected information, it can cause a cancellation, right? Now, why is that happening? It's because of a time difference. See what I'm saying? So we first have to correct the time difference before we truthfully investigate the frequency information, because the frequency information could be skewed by the time information. See what I'm saying? So this is why it's important for that acoustic crossover point, for you to understand and to know what's really happening there. That's where the subs and the tops, where things beat and shake hands, right? And I know we're a little above time, Carlos, but
No, I think we're fine. We've got a few guys that have been. Yeah. I mean, we don't have to rush through this, but keep in mind, guys. Yes, we're going to be on for a little while longer. And send in any questions if you can. We do have a question concerning the difference between the acoustic crossover point and the electronic crossover point.
Oh yeah. That's a good one too, right? So electronic crossover point has to do more with driver protection. Okay. Where the woofer has a limit or the high frequency has a limit. So that's why you have an electronic crossover, because that's like a high pass or a low pass filter that's placed in the electronics. So that's saying to the woofer that don't worry, I'm going to try my best to not have you see anything, beyond what you are built to handle. So that's the electronic crossover point. Now, the electronic crossover point, right, has nothing to really do with the acoustic crossover point in a sense, because the acoustic crossover point has a lot to do with level balancing. So you see, if I move this up or down, I am changing the acoustic crossover point. Okay. For example, if this cabinet had an electronic crossover point at 67 hertz right here, or 69, that can change, or that remains the same, but what changes is the acoustic crossover point based on the level bounds between the two sources. So that's the difference. One's driver protection and one's how we're going to hear it and how they're interacting with each other.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, just one point. As with many things with physics and acoustics, there are other interactions. There are many things that would affect, for instance, in this case, the acoustic crossover point. So phase response, and that the electronic crossover point can have an effect on that acoustic crossover point.
Yes. So for example, I don't have it here, right? But say for example, you try, if this cabinet was electronically crossover at 180 hertz, right? It'll start dipping down all the way here. So now if you use that with this crossover point on the subwoofer, we see that we have a tremendous hole here. So to really fill that, you really have to turn stuff up or down to some unusable degree, but knowing that you will have a hole there,
which might not be feasible,
which is not a smart move. So that's not a good combination between two mates. You know, we're too far apart.
Okay.
So now, and I like what you said, Carlos, because sometimes what you may have to do is manipulate the electronic crossover point. Using a high pass, you may want to open up the subs a little more, right? Or you may want to shave off a little more low end on the top boxes, just that you could get a better interaction. Absolutely. Like I said, remember like I use an example when I was in the studio and trying to put monitors in a studio, right? I would know where the boundary interference would be at what frequencies and what the room modes might be at what frequencies. And then I would try to chop that off, right? From the top boxes. And then I would bring the subwoofer to mate with that so that the actual physical characteristics of the room wasn't influencing the frequency response of anything. It was in there, but I made that the crossover point. So I use the environment's crossover point, or the dip in the environment, right? Which is a natural dip, as my natural crossover point, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and Terrence is also making that point that the acoustic crossover point can change also because of the environment. So it sounds like did you guys talk prior? It sounds like he knew what you were about to say. Okay. All right, thanks, Terrence. We appreciate your input.
Yeah, but this is exactly why the acoustic crossover point can change, because of the environment. It all depends on the room modes. Okay. Now, like I said, if we had two walls 60 feet apart, and we did the calculations there, it was like 9 or 10 hertz. So we're not crossing over anything there. However, in a smaller room, right, these things can become a thought. Now, why is this important? Because if we're going to put a system in there and we're going to optimize it, we might as well choose something, or choose that parameter, right, to understand if we could do driver protection there, can we run both sources at that region, right? Would the woofers be warm enough? Would they do, you know what I'm saying? These are all things you can give thought to, right? In finding out the information so that you can optimize and get the best results, right? Now, one last thing before we go. So we've got that information at 63, 75, and 90. So within that region, right? Now, how does that look on? So if I did between 63, 75, and 90, right? And I just looked at here on Smart, I was just kind of looking that region between 65 and 90. Well, that's a little too far, but anyways, we'll just call it there. So I look in this region, right? Now, I want to leave you with this wonderful formula, guys. All right. if you want to work out the average and know the exact numbers. Obviously, you can look at the two traces and analyze it. But if you don't want to sit there and play with numbers all day long until it lines up, you can actually take this information. And so, Carlos, I need to experiment with you. I don't know if you have a calculator nearby, but it doesn't have to be anything fancy.
I do. I've got an app for that.
So I'm going to give you this formula right here, right on the bottom. It says the delta phase difference, right, divided by 360, divided by the frequency that you're looking at, and multiply that by 1,000. Okay, and that should give you the delay time. All right, the delta phase frequency divided by 360, divided by the frequency in question, multiply by 1,000. So let's see what's going on there. Going back to smart, right? If we did 63, so at this, on this trace, the red trace, right, we see it's minus 76 degrees, right? That's where that's happening. Okay, if we now look at the, and that's at 60, if we look at the other trace, I'm sorry, Carlos, what did I say that was? That was minus 76 degrees. Just write these numbers down for me if you can, please.
Oh, okay. Writing, that's a different story. I don't have it. I could use a notepad here in the digital notepad.
Sorry,
okay,
buddy.
go ahead.
I know I'm putting you on the spot, but just for demo purposes.
Okay, I'm ready now.
So on the first trace, we've got minus 76 degrees, right? At 64. Okay. And then the second trace, we've got minus 27 degrees, right? So what is the difference there between minus 76 and minus 27? So we're talking a difference of 40 something. What is that, Carlos?
Yeah. 1 second. I should be able to do that in my head. Taking longer with the calculator than I am with the
with the true brains.
Yeah, 49.
49. So that's the delta difference is 49, right? Now let's divide that now, Carlos, by 360.
Okay.
And then the frequency we're dealing with here is 64. We'll divide that answer by 64.
64 even or 64.5?
64 even. Yeah, we'll keep it even numbers so we don't confuse our old brains.
Got it.
And then multiply that by 1,000. What is that answer?
Da, 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 da. All right, 2.126.
So that would be the exact delay time needed for these two phases to line up at 64, right? So we see at 64, it's 2.116. Now let's go back to our 75, okay? 75, where are you? Good. So we see the first trace was at 75 was minus 170 degrees, right? And then our second trace is minus 111. So what's that? A difference of...
You said 170 and 111?
Yeah. What's that? A difference of
59.
59, right?
Yeah.
So 59 divided by 360 again.
Got it.
And that's divided now by 75.
Got it.
Multiply by 1,000.
We're very close where we were before. 2.185.
So 2.185. So we see that in that region, we can set the delay, and it would give us a play in an acoustic crossover point between 64 and 75. Now let's go to our final one. I think it was 90. Oh, wow. So 90, right? We see if we look at the graph, we kind of like it's 89 is definitely in time. So there's no point in that, right? But however, if just for example purposes, if it was 85, so I could just continue the exercise. 85, the first trace is at minus 210. right? And then the second trace is at minus 166. So that's 34,
44.
44. Good. And that divided by 360.
Got it.
And that was at 85 hertz.
Okay.
And that's multiplied by 1,000.
Okay, now this is a bit different. It's 1.437 milliseconds.
Okay, if Carlos did it right, 1.437, right? Now, within the three numbers, 2.16, 2.18, and 1.43, right? You can sort of average out. And if you look at the trace itself, it kind of almost looks parallel, right? Except for when we get to 85, we see that it's a little closer. That's why we see a difference in time, right? Or what we want to say, a considerable difference in time. But with that formula, with the plus and minus 10, right, window, you can figure that out, right? And get yourself within a nice alignable region. Okay. Yeah, I think that's it. So if we keep this, we see kind of like, on that there. Now, one more thing, very important in the optimization process, and I don't like to overlook this, is that we have done all of this, right? Next, what we have to do is go back to the governors of audio, and that is what is on the left and right of our heads, our ears, right? So we have to listen, okay? Not only do we have to listen, but we have to listen when the audience comes into play, when the surfaces change, things can change. When temperature change, things can change. We know that sound bends around denser objects, and this is not only if an object that you see, but it also is air. Also, colder air is denser, so sound wants to wrap around that. It'll bend around, it'll pocket around, so forth. Not getting into too many, of that deep stuff there, but this is what these things. So the environment, right? You want to obviously keep in mind the environment. You also, I'm going back to the list of things here. I'm gonna put the slide up.
And what was that thing you said about the side of your head? Okay. I'm serious.
The almighty ears.
Okay. So are you saying that after you get done using your electronic goodies and software, and are you saying maybe close the screen and go around and actually use these? Use your ears? Is that what you're saying?
See, this is why you can't talk shop with the with the
old guys, huh?
pioneers. Absolutely agreed, buddy. Absolutely agreed, sir. The one thing that is crucial in mixing is developing the understanding of how your boxes react. Right now, this also goes for a studio engineer. That studio engineer knows exactly how your speakers sound, how they react, and when they make judgments, they know, yeah, it might sound bright in here, but I know it has to sound bright for it to sound good outside. Those things. But yes, sir, your ears. That's if I can digress, that's the one thing about sound that is so unfair, because you can have all the schooling and all the training and all the good stuff in the world, and you can know the ins and outs. But if your grandmother walks up to you without any sound training whatsoever and says, hey, this sounds bad, you know what? She's absolutely right.
Sounds bad to her.
Sounds bad to her. Then that's what it is. So it doesn't. It takes a great understanding to get it to sound right, but it takes not a great understanding to know if it sounds bad or not. That's the unfair part of sound, right? But yes, sir, using your ears. But optimization, get involved with what the environment is and what it's doing. Prediction software for sure. understand the parameters that you're dealing with, right? Because we see how electronic and acoustic changes, right? High pass, low pass filters, FIR filters, all of that stuff involved, very important. And I gave you some tips on the use of the analyzer. Okay, and hopefully, guys, that's given you some clarity on certain things here. And it was certainly a pleasure to do this today. Carlos?
Yeah, so guys, thank you. This obviously, thanks, Burton. Thanks very much. Burton was giving us his tips and techniques for the optimization process. That does not, obviously, in an hour and 20 minutes, give or take. There's no way he can get into, or anybody can get into the full process of equalization and time alignment. And I mean, you name it. There are 3-4 day courses for that. And sometimes, if we're talking, all right, I'm going to mention a product here. We're not necessarily touting one or the other, but it is a popular product, even for ourselves. Smart. They're up to version 8 software. Obviously, even if you buy the software and take a class on it, you're probably going to need to do it 2 or 3 times before you actually get the use of that software and how to utilize it correctly. And or it just takes a heck of a lot of experience and fiddling around with it and tuning it. And learning how to use it in the tuning process. So our purpose here today was to give you tips from somebody who's been in the business for quite a while, been doing this, in order to expedite and or understand a few of those processes that need to be utilized. At the end of the day, listen from guys like Burton, learn from him, take every opportunity that you can to learn from other folks, but then develop your own processes, develop and work on what works for you. Because what works for Burton and or myself might not necessarily work for you.
But that formula will never change, though, Carlos. That one is mathematics, right? That one is good.
Formulas are formulas.
Right.
All right. Anyways.
Oh, Carlos, one more thing. I skipped this, but I didn't mean to. I apologize. But in the capturing process, what's important is that you look at the average, right? And I overstepped that. I didn't say anything about that, but make sure you pay attention to the average in the capturing process. Take multiple snapshots, right? And then when you're going to actually apply filters, right? The filters that you apply is based on the average curve. Okay. Now there's no microphone there that's mimicking the average curve, right? So it's kind of difficult. So what you want to see is if the average curve says that you have a boosted 4K, right? Then obviously you need to turn 4K down. How do you know when it's right? Maybe you can look at the multiple traces and see where 4K is at, right? And then you turn 4K down, and it's and as long as it equals out 4K turned down on all the other traces, right? Then you know that you have brought it down to where the average said it needed to be. And this is why, again, multiple microphones are helpful.
Got it. All right, Burton, thanks very much.
Yes.
Guys, for those that you'll be viewing this now or in the future, we do have other topics, other chapters coming. So stay tuned to our website and our Facebook page, of course, to find out when we'll be back at it with other interesting topics for the audio industry. Thanks a lot, Burton. Thanks very much for everything.
Carlos, thank you so much.
All right, dude. We'll talk soon.
Yes.
See ya.